Hey, what's going on everyone? My name is Tyler. Thanks for checking out this video, and today I'm going to talk about the Canon 1DX Mark III. I've had it for about 3 months or so, and in that time I've shot a variety of different projects. Everything from like corporate style stuff, you know, talking head stuff and promo videos, BTS, vlogs, weddings, DIY, like tutorial type stuff for clients. So I've kind of done a variety of different projects, some being the A cam with travel videos, and some being the B cam to my C200 with the corporate style stuff and weddings and all that kind of stuff. So I've kind of used this in the capacities that I purchased this for. So through those 3 months, I've kind of been able to generate a pretty good opinion on this camera, and I figured now is a good time as any to kind of share my thoughts about it. So yeah, here we go. Let's do this. One thing, this is not going to be like a detailed. I'm not going to walk through the menu and go through all the autofocus settings and all the menus and all that kind of stuff, and specs. This is just more of a user experience kind of video, so no charts, no testing, all that kind of stuff. All that being said, let's just jump into some of the things that I do like about this camera, and then we'll talk about some of the things towards the end that I don't really like, and maybe some wish list things that maybe can be added via firmware. So let's go ahead and jump into the things that I like. And first thing is, as with all 1 series bodies, 1D series bodies, the build quality is just top notch. The best built DSLRs, obviously, that they make are their 1D series bodies that Canon makes. And for good reason. They're weather sealed, you know, magnesium alloy body, built like a tank. And yeah, so that's all I'm gonna say about that, because if you're familiar or have used any of the other 1D series bodies, everything you come to expect with the 1D series body obviously transfers over to the 1DX3. And as a user, you don't really notice the differences in build quality and weather sealing and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's improved, but you don't really notice it too much. So yeah. Anyways, that's pretty much all I'm going to say on that. But moving on, I'm going to talk about things specifically about the 1DX Mark III. And the first thing is image quality. The image quality of this camera is pretty stinking awesome. You have a bunch of different recording formats. You can record in 8-bit, which I haven't even touched really on this camera. And then you can record in 10-bit when you enable Canon log. And then you can record in 5.5K 12-bit RAW to get the best image quality out of this camera. But that being said, the 10-bit out of this camera looks spectacular. The fact that it is 10-bit just means you have more color fidelity, more color information, and less gradations between the different colors and shadows and stuff like that. So highlight roll-off is much more pleasing as compared to, say, the 5D Mark IV that had Canon log. And obviously even 12-bit, it's even more pleasing. 12-bit RAW, it's pretty stinking incredible. But sticking with the 10-bit recording, you can record in full frame 4K all the way up to 60p. And it's pretty stinking awesome, and it's actually downsampled from that 5.5K image into a very detailed 4K image. So it's just very detailed. It's not overly sharp, but it's just very detailed. I'm not going to get into the differences between that, but yeah, it just looks really, really pleasing, and it's just something that I'm really excited about. The image quality is pretty stinking good in this camera. Also, the really cool thing about recording codecs is you can actually send a 10-bit 422 signal out of the HDMI port and send it to something like the Atomos Ninja 5, which is what I have, and that's actually what I use especially for long form content. You know, with Atomos updating with the latest firmware update, you get the actual log signal coming out from the camera that you can record. So the benefits there is you can get ProRes recording. So my machine doesn't really like the H.265 files because it's an older machine, but having the ability to just record straight to ProRes means I don't have to transcode anything, and then you kind of bypass that recording limit, you know, that you get with DSLRs. So yeah, having that is pretty stinking awesome to be able to record 4K 10-bit 422 files on the camera. And moving on from image quality to the next thing is dynamic range. The dynamic range of this camera is marketed as 12 stops of dynamic range in Canon log recording. But if you move over and shoot into 5.5K RAW, you can actually extend that dynamic range a little bit more to, I saw it at some point, I don't know where it is, but it's like 14 or 15 stops of dynamic range in Canon log 2 when you shoot in RAW, because when you drop it into a timeline, you actually get Canon log 2 gamma. So it flattens that curve out. You get a much wider range of latitude. And I don't know the exact numbers. I haven't done any tests, and I probably won't ever do any dynamic range tests on this camera just because I'm not really into that, but it looks really good. And if you use the C200, it looks pretty much identical to the C200 RAW. and even like the C500 Mark II, the C-Log 2 and that. It looks pretty much identical to that, so if you're used to that kind of latitude, you should probably expect pretty similar results out of the 1DX Mark III. Up next is the dual pixel autofocus. I really love this about this camera. The dual pixel autofocus works great. If you're used to Canon cameras and you've used the autofocus in Canon cameras, you know what I'm talking about. And it's been a little bit enhanced on this camera. You have eye autofocus, which is pretty cool, and when you lose the eye and you turn around or something, it actually just like locks on to the head of a person and just tracks that, and it works pretty stinking good. You know, when I'm filming an interview or something like that and it just locks onto an eye or head or whatever the case may be, it's just comforting to know, like, as a B camera, this thing staying over there, it's just gonna hold on to focus, which is pretty awesome. And it's worked out really well for those types of shoots. Now, big caveat with dual pixel autofocus is when you're in basically in full frame 60p, you're not going to get dual pixel autofocus. So in 5.5K RAW 60p, you don't get autofocus, and then in full frame 4K 60p in 10-bit or whatever, you're not going to get autofocus, which is kind of a bummer. But you do get it if you crop in onto the crop mode. It's like a 1.3 times crop in 60p. Then you still have autofocus there. So it's kind of the same field of view that you had in the 1DX Mark II. If that helps kind of put it in perspective for 60p, that's kind of what you get there. But the benefit is you get 10-bit recording in this. But the cool thing is you can actually use focus peaking. It has focus peaking on this camera, which is awesome. So if you flip the lens to manual focus, you can actually use focus peaking. It doesn't matter the frame rate or resolution that you're using. You can use focus peaking if you're manually focusing. So although you don't have autofocus, at least you can use focus peaking to kind of get an idea of the focus that you have. Up next is 120 frames per second. It does look really good in this camera. Albeit only in HD, it still looks really good. It's full frame. You have dual pixel autofocus and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it looks really good. Just one caveat with it, you got to make sure you have plenty of light with the 120p. When you start pushing the ISO and everything, it does start to get really noisy and muddy, especially in the shadows. But otherwise, outdoors, all that kind of stuff, it looks fantastic, and it upscales to 4K really well. So yeah, really awesome there. Up next is proxy recording. This is something that's super cool on this camera, and it's actually way better implemented than it is on my Canon C200, which is quite a shame. But the proxy recording, if you don't know what that is, basically you can record the 5.5K RAW onto one card, because it comes with 2 card slots here. On one card you can record 5.5K RAW, and on the other card you can record a 10-bit 422 4K proxy file, which is pretty stinking awesome. And I'm pretty sure the format is an IPB format, so it's not optimized for editing, but it's way less data rate, a much more manageable data rate for the proxy file. Next up is the low light of this camera. The low light, this thing does see in the dark pretty good. I've shot all the way up to 25,600 ISO on this thing, and had totally usable footage. It was pretty stinking incredible. Yeah, there's not much more to say about that. The low light's just really good. The next thing and the last thing that I'm gonna talk about, there's plenty more stuff that I do like about this camera, but I'm gonna try to keep this video under 3 hours long, is the battery life. The batteries on the 1DX, I mean, they're known to last forever. And like on a wedding shoot that I did, I had 3 batteries with me, and I used this camera pretty much the entire day from about 10 a.m., 10 or 11 a.m. to about 10 p.m. I only went through 2 batteries, and I still had some battery left on the second battery. Didn't even touch the 3rd battery. And I pretty much had this camera on the entire day. So it just lasted forever. So those are the things that I like about the camera. I mean, there's plenty more about this camera that I like, but these are the just kind of things that I noticed that I really liked about this camera. That being said, there are some things that I feel like Canon dropped the ball on, and hopefully some of these things can be added back via firmware. And the first thing that it blows my mind that's not on this camera is time-lapse movie mode. And you know, I get that like most pro time-lapse photographers or filmmakers, I'm not sure which way you call it, but they're gonna use an intervalometer to get raw images and all that kind of stuff, and I get that. But there are just certain times where being able to just jump into time-lapse movie mode for documentary filmmakers or run and gun filmmakers or vloggers or whatever the case may be able to just set the camera down, get a time lapse in camera, and the camera processes it for you, so you can just drop it on the timeline and be ready to go. Because sometimes you don't need all the raw controls for a time lapse. Sometimes you just want to have something really quick. I don't know why it was left out on the 1DX Mark III. Hopefully that can be updated in a firmware update. The other thing that I'm surprised about, and it's kind of a bummer, the frame rate options. Although it does 120p, I was surprised that they didn't give us 120p in 4K, or even maybe something higher than 120p in HD, something closer to 200 or 240 frames per second or something. Anyways, that's pretty much all I'm gonna say on the frame rates. The frame rates that we have on the camera are great. It'd just be cool. I mean, we always want more frame rates because slow motion's awesome, but yeah, it just would have been cool to have a little bit more frame rate options on this camera. The next thing I wish this camera had was face-only autofocus. This is a feature I use on my Canon C200 all the time, especially with interviews and stuff like that, where you're focusing on talent, on face. In certain situations, I mean, even Canon's dual pixel autofocus will kind of lose focus for a second, and if you're on just face priority or any face autofocus that's on this camera, it may lose focus for a second and hunt for the focus and then lock back on the face. With face only, it doesn't do that. It just remembers the last place that the face was focused on, and then when it catches focus back on the face, it starts the autofocus again. So it's super handy for interviews, especially, just to know that it's not going to be hunting for the face the whole time. It's just going to remember the last place it saw the face, and then when it locks back on, it'll be good to go. So something I really wish that this camera had. Hopefully maybe in the future it'll add that feature, because that's something that I really do use on my C200 all the time. Next up has to do with monitoring. I wish there's a lot of that leads to be desired with monitoring on this camera, specifically for video and specifically for exposure. The only thing you get is a histogram, and there's two things wrong with that. Number one, the histogram, it's only there when before you hit record. As soon as you hit record, it disappears, which is kind of a bummer. More so, I wish, because how video focused this camera is, I wish that they implemented false color, or at least a waveform on this camera, but false color would be that much more exciting to have. This kind of segues into the next point with exposure and all that kind of stuff. I wish that this camera was able to actually record in 10-bit in Canon Log 2 and Canon Log 3 Gamma Curve, as opposed to just Canon Log 1. It would be really awesome to be able to record it in Canon Log 2, because that's one of the big selling points of the C500 Mark II, is to be able to record in Canon Log 2 in 10-bit, and it looks amazing. And it'd be awesome to have this as a little B camera, gimbal camera, anything like that, to be able to record in the same Gamma Curve without having to record in RAW. And if it did that, then you could actually run this out to an external monitor and be able to monitor in Canon Log 2 to be able to get proper exposure and all that kind of stuff. And then Canon Log 3, if C200 users, this would be a great addition to be able to record in Canon Log 3. Because for me personally, I much prefer Canon Log 3 on the C200 than Canon Log 1, and it'd just be awesome to be able to have both my cameras recording in Canon Log 3. So yeah, I know that the Canon Log 2 isn't on the C200. They've said it's because it only records in 8-bit, and that's just kind of the limitation of 8-bit. And I get that. I mean, that's a lot of latitude and a lot of color you got to bring back to an 8-bit codec, but the like the C300 Mark II and the C500, they do it in 10-bit. So and this records in 10-bit, so it'd be really awesome to be able to get Canon Log 2 and Canon Log 3 in this camera as well. And then the very last thing that I wish this camera had, which maybe could be in a firmware update too, I don't know, would be a 4K Super 35-ish crop. I think based on the math, it'd be like a 1.3, 1.4 times crop. If you did like basically punched in a crop in on the sensor for a true 4K readout of the sensor and be able to record that in RAW, just because, I mean, I think RAW is the future of recording, and having those different things, kind of like the C500 Mark II has, to be able to kind of match the framing and all that kind of stuff. It'd just be really cool to be able to do that in this camera as well. So anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say about this camera. So, hope you're still here. If you are still here, bless your soul. This is a long one. I know this is gonna be a long one. So thank you for sticking around. That's pretty much all I have to say about the camera. There are other things that I haven't mentioned, obviously, that I'm sure when I'm editing this, I'll say, oh crap, I wish I thought about this. But these are the things that popped into my mind that are pretty much the things that I like and I don't like about the camera. There's more things that I do like about this camera than I don't like about this camera, which is why I've kept it, and it will be utilized very much on the daily, and it still is. But if you're considering getting this camera as your A camera for video, as opposed to say the C200, I would definitely say don't do that. I never would have gotten a DSLR as my A camera, but I already have the Canon C200 for my production and for my company. So the 1DX Mark III was kind of a no-brainer B camera for that camera. So yeah, I would definitely, C200, like it has XLR, built-in NDs, all that kind of stuff. It is a better video focused camera, but the 1DX Mark III does kind of fill its gaps and kind of goes places where the C200 can't go, all that good stuff. And it's just a great B camera, gimbal camera, slider camera, whatever the case may be. So yeah, anyways, now I'm just rambling. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it informative, useful. Probably wasn't entertaining, but if it was, that's pretty awesome if I could pull that off. And anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. If you're still here and you want to leave a comment, and after all of these hours of watching this video, you still haven't found something to comment about, then I got a question for you. What is your favorite vegetable? Everyone's gotta like vegetables. No, not everyone's gotta like vegetables, but you gotta eat them because they're healthy. So, what is your favorite vegetable and why? Totally random, but that's how I roll. So anyways, answer that question. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite vegetable is, why. Gotta be healthy, so veggies are healthy. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.